I promised you that we'd have a range of carriers. So we've had some really major ones, some foreign ones from Europe and such. But what's interesting is we've seen some new carriers as well, like Light Squared. And we're going to see some more interesting fixed carriers later on in the day as well. Also in the morning, I alluded to the fact that sometimes it's easier to make a deal with a smaller carrier who might be able to turn more rapidly, might be able to implement solutions more rapidly. So just pointing out that the next carrier is certainly one of those. And also to stay tuned, because later on, another carrier, Jersey Telecom, in a similar vein, gives an opportunity for entrepreneurs. So they're talking both about NextGen from Australia and Jersey Telecom from Europe as platforms that you might be able to leverage as an entrepreneur for your ideas that can maybe be moved more nimbly, but provides you with the real proof of concept in a scalable telecom network. So with that, I'm going to invite up from Australia, Peter and Anssi from NextGen to have a seat. Slide advancer there.
Okay, good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share with you about our business firstly, and I won't go into that in a lot of detail, but we have quite a diverse business in Australia. We are a competitive carrier, but we also provide services to other carriers, so we're kind of unique. I'll also talk to you a bit about what's happening in the Australian marketplace, which will be of interest to a few of you, particularly as the government has a plan there to subsidise the rollout of a very high-speed network. And I think for a lot of developers, that could be very interesting, particularly for over-the-top type content. And then my colleague, Anssi, who runs our corporate development and strategic business unit, will share a bit about what we've done in the innovation space as well. So that shows you the base of businesses that we have, and apologise for the small text there. Today, in the Australian, we also have a business in New Zealand, but in the Australian market, we have 5 key lines of business. We have a business called NextGen Networks that we bought probably about 7 or 8 years ago. For not a lot of money, we bought out a receivership after the .com crash. And that now is one of the largest pure data carriers in the country, with in fact the second largest long-haul fibre network in the country as well. Mainly targets corporate and government and wholesale. And as an example, in the wholesale market, we have virtually all of the ISPs and mobile carriers, except for maybe one being the incumbent, as customers. We also have a construction maintenance business that does work throughout Australia, New Zealand and parts of Asia. They would probably be the preeminent builder of telco infrastructure, and they'll go in and do a turnkey build of a wireless network, a fibre network, etc. for other carriers. We run a wholesale data centre business where we own and operate data centres today in Australia, and we're going through a major plan to and currently building new data centres. We can share that with you because it has some interesting insight as to what we're seeing with demands in the marketplace there. We have a cloud services business which mainly focuses on private clouds, if most of you understand what that is. In other words, we provide direct links into corporates, medium and large, but we do provide an infrastructure as a service offering to those corporates. We've been doing that for a couple of years. We were one of the first to launch, but we have a true multi-user platform there, offering predominantly compute and storage. And then we've just recently announced the build or the proposed build of a new submarine cable between Australia and Singapore. That will be the most modern link in the region. It's a 16 terabit per second up to cable, which will probably be one of the fastest announced cables in the world. We've partnered with Alcatel, and Alcatel's been a partner of ours for about 10 years, Alcatel-Lucent. And they'll be the equipment provider for that. So that's the portfolio. Just very briefly, in terms of our NextGen business then, you can see there on that slide just the extensive coverage of that particular network. Now, Australia's a large continent, but it just shows you how extensive that network is. It goes all the way up in the sunny part of Australia there, up in Brisbane to Townsville, all the way across to Perth, and then shortly we're due to finish building all the way up to Darwin as well. That network then has major fibre build-outs in the capital cities, as well as linking into data centres, both our own data centres and to other data centres. And today we connect into something like 110 competitive data centres. We run a high-speed data products across that, and we were the first in the country, as an example, to launch VPLS quite a few years ago with an Alcatel platform. But what it enables us to do is really focus on high speed, very high speed. To us, high speed is now today 1 gigabit per second and higher for our customers. We have some customers who are taking 10 gigabit per second connections into their sites, and we're providing networks of multiple 10 gigabit per second connections to those customers. We have one customer who's trialling 100 gigabit per second network in a very specialised application, and that's a long-haul network as well. So we focus on specialised data services in that particular business. It is a competitive business, meaning we're out there competing with the likes of, say, the Telstras and the Singapore Telecom. If we have a look at the national broadband network in Australia, you've probably seen some of this in the press, so I don't intend to go into a lot of detail on it, other than to say that the Australian government was of the view that the incumbent and others were not really prepared to invest in a high-speed network, although we do have data over pay TV networks, we do have, or HFC if you like, we do have very competitive DSL networks in the country. We have limited fibre rollout in the country. So the Australian government decided to, if you like, sponsor and commit to building a wholesale-only fibre network. Now, this network, is underway in terms of its construction, but it will take up to 10 years. And in building this network, what they're hoping to do is get over 90% of premises to have 100 megabits per second fibre connection. It will cost a lot of money, though, and in the current economic climate, that is very difficult for any government to be able to propose such a strategy, and they are copying quite a bit of flack in relation to that. But nonetheless, whether the government can see this through or not, or if not, it may morph into another form of network. We do still believe, and the industry believes, that you will see some form of national broadband network that's rolled out. Now, I think the benefit or the appeal to a number of you here today, really, with that network is it will be wholesale, and therefore, it's not really going to be subject to the whims of any one carrier or an incumbent carrier to determine what applications are run over that network. So probably for the first time in history, you're going to see a large-scale network with up to 10 million endpoints at 100 megabits per second. And the types of applications that could drive could be very interesting indeed. We expect to be a major part of that, because what they've done is kept the connectivity between the key points of interconnect with this network open and competitive, which is a good thing, because otherwise we would have had a major threat on our business and a number of other businesses. So if you like, the network will be made up of 100 points of interconnect around the country, and those points of interconnect will be connected via competitive backhaul providers such as ourselves. So what that enables is the likes of a content provider to come to us, and for the first time we can deliver to 10 million endpoints once this is built from just one, if you like, one data centre ultimately. That's really outlined there. So, with 120 points of interconnect, as I mentioned, with the likes of us, and there will be one or two others who will provide this capability, probably not as quickly and nimbly as we will, but we will be able to provide content and connectivity to up to 10 million premises. Now, this is mainly consumer and SME. The corporate market in Australia is very well served by competitive carriers, and probably most of the large buildings in Australia would have half a dozen or more fibre carriers competitively operating. In terms of innovation, I think, Anssi, was I going to hand over to you now, or? All right, I'll just cover this very briefly, and then we'll move into a few more slides. So, being a competitive carrier and not a particularly large organisation, I mean, we have around about 1,500 employees, but we can move very quickly. As a result, we're very keen to work with partners to adopt new technologies. And an example there is we were the first in the country to work to adopt a VPLS architecture, which some of you would understand what that is. Very high-speed switching of both layer 2 and layer 3, and really has been the predecessor to the widespread adoption of Ethernet, if you like, in the marketplace. So we were the first to roll out a VPLS network. It's been a very reliable and robust network, and now we see a lot of corporate and government customers who just use that as their default product for carrying critical data. We've also offered, for instance, Fox, you would know Fox Sports, for instance, run all of their broadcast traffic across a VPLS network. We were one of the first in the world to do that. And we're offering 1 gigabit per second connections into sporting stadiums, and we carry that traffic live, full HD as it's known. Obviously then ultimately the end users see that on their TV screens. We've offered things like fibre intrusion detection for military type applications. This is where you can see changes in the actual, if you like, sending signals across fibre optic. You can actually see minute changes in the signal, which means that there is movement in the ground near that fibre cable, and that can be used for those type of applications. We're working with Coulomb Technologies here in the Valley on electric vehicle charging networks, so we do that as well. And we also roll out technology for the latest digital hospital applications. We're going to go into this next section in a bit more detail as an example of how we've innovated. But we've been running and we own and operate data centres for about 10 years. We know how to build them. We know how to design efficient data centres. We embarked on a process about 3 years ago to come up with the next generation of data centres, and we spent a lot of money internally doing that. But in actual fact, then when we started to look beyond our own internal resources, we found a very good solution elsewhere in the world, and we're using that solution now to roll out new data centres. We'll cover that in more detail. I've mentioned Infoplex and what we do in the cloud environment there. So today in cloud computing, what we've tended to do is we have developed our own multi-user private cloud. That is, there's not a lot of organisations out there that offer that service today in the marketplace, particularly for medium to large organisations. There's plenty that offer it for smaller organisations. But some of the things that the large corporates typically want is, for instance, they can't have any downtime. Storage is absolutely critical, so you need to use the likes of Tier 1 storage. And so the whole platform has to be very resilient. So that's an offering that we developed and we take to market today. We've used EMC as the core storage provider there, and we're using VMware and Dell, but also some integration software to pull all that together. I'll now hand over to Anssi, who'll just run us through an example of some innovation that we've done of recent time. Okay.
As Peter mentioned, we've been operating data centers since we bought the NextGen network. And so we had legacy data centers with a normal sort of industrial property. And for the longest time, we wondered how we can make that data center business work. And what transpires is that we never really could make the economics work really as well as we wanted to because of the capital overhang and tenancy issues. Then in March 2010, a company called Blade Room wanted to meet us, and we didn't know what they had to say. So we first met with them and thought, gee, they have some fantastic type of technology. So by next month, we had all our internal business cases, NDA, everything else sorted. By May, myself and another guy flew to UK. We toured their facilities in Northern England, in Wales, in London, and came back and said, yeah, this is the real deal. And by end of June, the entire Australia-New Zealand distribution agreement had been finalized. All the legals had been completed. By 1st of July, the Metronode was separated as a standalone business, and a new GM, general manager, or senior VP, I guess you would call it here, was appointed to run the business. The following month, all the capital modeling and preliminary designs were completed, and a couple of months afterwards, $100 million CapEx expenditure was approved by the board. And following the capital expenditure, we placed the order, which was the biggest that Blade Room, by far the biggest that Blade Room has ever received. And we just started the construction for the first 10 megawatt and 3 megawatt data centers, and they should be operational by December. So it kind of shows you what can happen when you can move quickly and when you identify that something matches what you're after.
I mean, I might just comment on the data center example briefly. For many of you here, you probably take data centers for granted. One of the biggest issues with data centers today is really the capital cost per megawatt of power that's delivered. So that was one of the biggest issues we had, just the cost. The second issue was, as we're moving into a much greener environment, and in Australia, a carbon tax is going to be introduced. Data centers are typically very inefficient, so we wanted the latest efficiency in terms of power efficiency. And the third thing was, as we're moving to more and more cloud services, of course, each of those racks that goes into the data center is consuming more and more power. Traditionally, a data center rack would be about 1 to 2 kilowatt. Today, they're typically about 10 kilowatts. And over time, they're going to increase to 20 kilowatts per rack. So what we've come up with there, and this is a service that we actually take beyond Australia. We have rights to market this technology in the whole Asia-Pacific region. The data centres that we're now building and will have finished by the end of December have a power utilisation efficiency of about 1.1 compared to traditionally 2 to 3 for most data centres. And we can deliver those data centres typically within about 6 to 12 months compared to 2 to 3 years to building a normal data centre. It's a modular architecture. You can expand it as you go. So a really innovative piece of technology.
Just going on the as an innovation partnership process, I guess we are nimble and small enough that we actually don't have any formal processes. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And in reality, a lot of people a lot of carriers constantly worry about the over-the-top and all that stuff that destroys their business model and they touch to their end customers. In reality, we're a wholesaler, so we would be very, very happy to have, for example, Netflix on our network. And we'd be happy to white label our network, introduce APIs and all the rest of it, if it makes sense. And in reality, we just simply don't have a channel conflict with the end consumer. So if you have either residential consumer applications or you have corporate style applications, we'd be happy to talk to you. So this is really just our technology's shopping list. And you will note that these guys, they try to resolve particular technical issues, and there's a reason why I put that up as a shopping list, because there's a particular niche issues that every company always has. Like, for example, the IaaS guys are really looking for better orchestration tools that they have today, or they haven't been able to find. And obviously you can get a copy of this one. So if any of these sort of hit the mark with you, please give us a call. But more importantly, really, from where we stand is that the innovation should never be left purely for the technologists, because as in the case of just short in the data center business, it is actually the complete change of economics of that technology that changes the game. It is not just you improve something marginally technically, but the business case and the profits and the return on equity and everything else that we were able to do compared to what the, I guess, conventional way of doing things is completely different. So from that perspective, and again from the innovation perspective, it really always is the stuff that we absolutely have no idea about, that somebody just gives us a call and say, I got a great idea. And they are the ones that change business cases. And those are the ones that we're very happy to hear people talk to us about. And then going back to the processes, I think our processes are as complicated as sending me an email. And because of the way that we think about innovation, it means that if myself and the CTO think it has merit, it goes to Peter and we make a decision. There is no further committees, anything else like that. And that's when then we're done. But I guess in reality, we are probably more allowing you to help us on a technical or service perspective rather than a strategic investor or an exit, unless it's something completely unusual. But that's not really our style. It's more in the either hardware engineering perspective or service model innovation. And I think that's probably it.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks a lot. It's very, very interesting and a slightly different model than we've seen. I think like you said, the formal approach you have and the process you've established is give me a call, and that works at a certain scale. And of course, someday should you blow that out of the water and become a big, you might have to formalize the process. But that does work when you put your number on the board and actually responds. So that's great. Does anybody have any questions for NextGen? Excellent. Well, it looks like you guys summed it all up. I appreciate your slide. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say, Jonathan, why don't you come up first, and I'll introduce you to the NextGen guys, because Jonathan's our next speaker with violent memory. You indicated you need to know something about Flash. So
that's all right.
Jonathan, Anssi. All right. Thanks a lot. So thank you very much, NextGen. And good job. All right. There's one introduction made.
All right.